Good morning. I look like a ghost. My lighting is particularly bad today.
Is it a nice day down in Austin, Katrina?
It was nice this morning, but it's not as hot as it was. Soggy. I think it's going to be a really hot summer. Paige is getting ready to move down here. So she's in Minnesota currently. All right. Just waiting for folks to trickle. While we're waiting, does anyone need any help with anything? And if I owe you an email, I am working on it. I'm very behind for the birthday. Paige, I'm going to make you a co-host also in case something happens to my internet.
Good morning.
I've been doing. You guys are quiet today, huh? Get started here in just a couple of minutes. Schuber, did you get a haircut?
I did.
Looks good.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started on announcements and just keep letting folks in from the waiting room when they trickle in. So a couple of things for those of you who birthday bash. Thank you so much. I hope that you met lots of awesome people. I'm going to be distributing out just a quick survey, feedback survey, so that we can, kind of keep temperature with the things that we can support you with. We have shuffled a few things around on the calendar because I'm getting requests from people that around some of the things that they really need help with right now. So we want to be responsive to that so that we can provide you, the resources that you really need. So don't be shy about letting me know in that survey about what you need, because if I don't know what you need, I can't help you with it. Today, we're still going to be continuing on with, basically we're ending kind of the financial portion of our conversation. And I know that fundraising and just finding capital is a big concern and very top of mind for so many of you. So we've spent a little bit more time on that. Has been on because of the request. And then just a quick note too, that I'll be also sending out a survey to your advisors, and just so that they can give me feedback around how you guys are working together, and any other notes that they may have about how we can help support you. So I'll kind of make all of those results visible to everyone so we can adjust the schedule accordingly. And we'll be bringing on, over the next few weeks, we'll be bringing on a couple of co-packers, a couple of supply chain folks. I know that some of you are also needing help with sourcing, so we're going to bring somebody on for that. And then we'll do a deeper dive on marketing. I know that is, all of the needs marketing was also a really high request. So we'll be doing a deep dive into that. And then we'll kind of wrap up at the end with more fundraising support and generally, foundational topics around building a business that lasts. So I'm excited for us to keep going. So today I have brought on Paige Gardner from Camber Road. I wanted to also share more resources around capital that's non-dilutive. And since some of you are also growing and needing this support, I thought that this would be a great conversation today. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Paige for a quick overview, and then we'll open up the floor as usual. So Paige, go ahead and take us away. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I recognize a few faces. I think Shubra, I met you at Capital Factory a month or so ago. So great to meet you guys, and excited to talk a little bit about Camera Road, about what we do and what we look for, things to avoid, and ultimately then open it up for discussion. I'll be candid. My overview is short and sweet. What we do is simple. So I hope that as I go, you guys can jot down questions or thoughts, and then once I'm finished, we can have a conversation, discussion, and talk through some of these things, because I think that is really where a lot of the value lies. So let's get started. So my name is Paige Gardner. As Katrina said, I am based in Minneapolis, actually, Minnesota, born and raised here. Started with Camera Road about a year ago and was assigned Texas. Had never been to Texas before, and I've really learned to love it so much so that I think I'm moving to Austin actually in the fall. But we've got reps based around the country that cover all major cities and markets, and we finance equipment and tech across the world. But we ask that all of our customers need to have some type of US entity. Prior to starting at Camera Road, I worked for a CPG company. So it's called So Good So You, a probiotic juice shot company based here in Minneapolis, and actually did marketing for them. So through that, wore a ton of different hats that I'm sure you guys understand the way that goes, and lots of product iterations, a couple attempts to go D2C. It's complicated. I get that, especially when you have a refrigerated product. But it was an awesome experience, and learned a lot through that, and really enjoyed it. And it felt like a natural, great segue into this space now, where I have the opportunity to connect with other CPG companies and really learn a little bit about a lot is what we like to say. With that, I naturally, I think, find myself most attracted to CPG companies. I was talking to Katrina yesterday. It's us being industry agnostic, we see it all. So it's SaaS, fintech, so many other things, but I really do. My heart is with CPG, and I think just being able to touch it and feel it and eat it or drink it or whatever it may be, is near and dear to my heart. So I'm grateful to be speaking with you guys. So who is Camera Road? We do one thing, and we like to think we do it really good. And that's equipment financing. So we work with startups, fast growing startups, a lot of times venture-backed companies that are looking to acquire equipment and tech. And when I say equipment and tech, that can mean a very wide variety of things, from manufacturing equipment and production needs to internal tech like laptops and monitors, office furniture, all the way on the other end of the spectrum, submarines and robotics. Anything that's essential to your business, we'll look at financing, and we do that in the form of a lease. So not a loan. That's the biggest distinction I always want to make up front, is we are different in that sense. We are a lease, truly non-dilutive. So with that, there are no covenants, warrants, personal guarantees, none of that. Our main goal is we want to help you guys to extend your runway and ultimately get to the next milestone in a better state, and hopefully sooner. Our typical initial investment is around $1 million. We'll go 1 to 5 to start, but we will start smaller if we think that there's going to be more to do in the near future. Our biggest thing at Camera Road is we're trying to find customers and relationships that are in it for the long haul. So not as much interested in the one-off transactional type deal, but rather finding the right customers that we can grow together. And hopefully that dollar amount can grow over time, and we can be your guys' first phone call when you get a big order in and you need to up production ASAP. So I think the simplest way to say what we do is you spec the equipment, we buy it, and we lease it back to you. Terms and everything are determined based on your credit profile, the equipment, a wide variety of things. I'm not the credit person. We've got a full credit team that does that, but simple process. We look at your financials a bit, and I'll go over to some of the things that we ask for when we gather due diligence items. But take a look and decide, okay, this is the term we're comfortable doing and the pricing, and then I'd come back to you guys with a proposal and hopefully get started. I'd say easiest way to put what is equipment financing: spreading of payments for new equipment or tech over a long term versus instead paying a lump sum upfront. So we always talk about at Camera Road, cash is king. And, the more you can preserve those equity dollars, the better, and not to fly too close to the sun. Because, the last couple of years, we've learned that the world is unpredictable. And so I think the more cash that you can preserve, the better. Benefits to equipment financing: first and foremost, preserve your capital. So use your equity dollars towards things like hiring, R&D, non-depreciating assets. These are things that we find investors tend to like and really resonates with them. And instead have Camera Road come in and take on those depreciating assets. 2, cash flow management. So with equipment financing, you've got predictable payments that will free up cash and credit lines for other operating needs. 3, retain equity. So as I mentioned, our leases are truly non-dilutive, meaning free of covenants, warrants, personal guarantees, no gotcha type things embedded in our leases. We really pride ourselves on that, on having really clear, transparent, founder-friendly contracts. And I think that's something important to consider when you're exploring all your options too, because I know that's not the case across the board in equipment financing. 4, drive productivity and enhance scalability. So reach milestones sooner in a stronger fashion. And then lastly, flexibility. So by leasing, you're not tied to this equipment forever. And I learned through my time with the juice company that product iterations come and go. And there are times where you want to try something, but maybe you're not certain that you want that piece of equipment forever or 10 years. And that this gives you some flexibility. Just because if you go with us, we own the asset. That's our collateral in the deal. And at the end of the lease, you have 3 options. As the customer, you can purchase it from us at fair market value. You can say, hey, Paige, we no longer want this equipment, and send it back, which I always say is not what we want, just because we don't want a lot of bottling machines or labelers or whatever it may be. We don't have space for that here. And we have to resell it. And typically it's not much of a return for us. But the third option, what I always incentivize, and I'd say 90% of our customers do following the initial term, is they rewrite and extend the lease. And so that's when your lease payments get cheaper and cheaper over time. Of course, the longer you lease the equipment, the cheaper it'll get and the better the terms will be. But as I kind of touched on earlier, our true value, I think, shines through in those moments when we can fund fast. After you've established a payment history, you can give me a call and say, hey, Paige, we need $1 million in equipment today. And if we have a relationship in place, we can do that and be that quick landline for you guys. Needs that we've solved in CPG, just to give you guys a couple of examples. I'm not going to mention the actual company names just because we are under NDA with most of our customers, but I'll give you an idea of what they sell and what equipment we provided them with. So a canned beverage company, with them, we've done can fillers, scissor lifts, cleaning equipment, scale filling machines, pallet jacks, fermentation tanks, air compressors, heat exchanger. With that, I'll add, that's a lot of fancy jargon that maybe you guys are familiar with, but we're not equipment experts. We are equipment financing experts. So we leave it up to our customers to really guide and lead that charge on the vendors they want to work with. And we're happy to offer, our advice if we've worked in that space before and know some vendors that we really like. But we look to you guys to spec that out and determine where you want to buy it and what you want. That is kind of your domain. Another example are nutrient dense snacks. So for this company, we did or have done industrial fryers, coolers, pressure filter systems, and dehydrators. We've got a biodegradable water bottle maker company out in California. And for them, we do molds, capping machines, and blowing machines. Pet health company, for them, conveyors and some automated stuff for their warehouse and shipping equipment, which I feel like is coming up more and more as of late, as people looking to optimize their fulfillment and distribution, and how to streamline that. And then last example I've got here is farm tech. So a company where we came in and we actually did all their HVAC and tenant improvement stuff for their space, which isn't something that I thought about initially when I heard equipment and tech, but that is also something that we can do. So thinking about how to optimize and enhance your existing facilities and things that might seem not as natural, we are always happy to look at. And I will add too that we typically on almost every deal bundle in some soft costs. So intangibles like shipping, installation, software, things like that, that go along with the equipment and tech. And we're happy to finance that as well. We just always want it to be majority hard costs. Common mistakes that we've run into. I think I wanted to bring this up. So I said how I was in marketing prior to this world now that I'm in at Camera Road. And I've got a lot of love for marketing, and I know how important it is in CPG, but I want to mention, without streamlined production, marketing really is irrelevant at the end of the day. And how number one thing really is getting your product out there in the hands of consumers and customers. And so not to lose sight of the importance of the production and making sure that you've got your eyes on that at all times. Another line that we hear pretty often is, well, we've got enough cash on hand, we're going to just use that to buy the equipment. Which I've learned over time, what that really means is we've got equity dollars that we're going to use to purchase equipment and tech. And personally, I think that is a major mistake that people make, because those equity dollars are a hell of a lot more expensive than what you'll end up paying us, because you've given up a percentage of your business for that cash. And rather than using that money towards these depreciating assets, you have the ability to allocate it towards more meaningful investments like R&D and growth and personnel and all that. So we always encourage people to push the envelope a bit on that and consider your options, because it really can be wise and impactful 5-10 years from now when you go to sell your company, and you have that much more ownership in it. And then the third mistake too, running out of cash. So flying too close to the sun. And we find, when companies run out of cash, that's typically when the cap tables get reset and people's feelings get hurt. And so, explore all avenues and options for non-dilutive capital, especially, and try to extend your runways as much as you can. And that ultimately, hopefully, will help you protect your ownership and your equity. So how do we assess our potential customers? We would, well, of course, we always want to meet everyone we work with. Relationships is the biggest piece of our business. And so that's number one. But what I ask for when we look to vet a company are most recent 3 months of bank statements, detailed cap table. The reason we ask for this is institutional funding is the number one way we can get comfortable quickly. That doesn't mean we won't work with companies that are not institutionally backed, but it is a way to help us get comfortable and knowing that you guys have kind of been put through the ringer, and thoroughly vetted by some of people who do it best. And so we like to see how is the equity distributed amongst the company. And then we ask too, your monthly historic balance sheet, statement of cash flows, and P&L, and same for projections. And then list of lenders and terms, if you have any, and a description of the equipment and timeline for purchasing. So that's what I bring to my credit team. They take a look and they say, okay, based on, X, Y, and Z, we feel comfortable doing a 24-month term, say, and this is what their monthly payments would look like. Okay, I will pause there. What questions do you guys have for me? I know that was kind of quick, but really what we do is pretty straightforward, and I'm hoping we can have some discussion.
I can get us started. You mentioned founder-friendly terms. I think, there's a lot of early stage brands right now that are looking at this as an option. I was just having a conversation with somebody yesterday. They're on the verge of closing a major retailer. And so they really need to gear up very quickly for production to fulfill that, right? So if someone that isn't venture-backed is coming to you, I guess this is a two-part question. What should they be looking at in the contract? What does founder friendly mean? How do we translate that?
Yeah.
Number one. And then number two, how do they convince you? What will make them attractive if they have those venture dollars? They're early in that.
Yeah. So first half of the question, I'd say, one, I mentioned like gotcha terms that we've seen are auto renewals. So sometimes some of our competitors will have auto renewals that are 12 months long. So that means if you don't give notice that you're either going to purchase the equipment, part ways, whatever it may be, within 12 months of the term, that actual lease ending, you're locked in for another 6 months, or it depends on the contract. But Camber Road, ours are 6 months auto renewal period, and that's, we feel like that's ethically right and fair to our customers, and that's something I think where people can kind of get trapped is when they're not aware of the auto renewal. Another thing that we've seen in competitors' contracts are pieces and parcels guidelines. So they will require that you hang on to all like packaging boxes, original shipping containers that everything came in, or they won't accept it as to be returned following the lease, which is another clause that we don't have in our lease, but definitely something to keep an eye out for. And then right of first refusal too. So be aware if there is a clause in there that talks about right of first refusal, that gives them the ability to deny you to go to Camber Road or another lender and get equipment financing without their permission. So of course, they have the right of first refusal. They say I showed a contract to a company that has a relationship with another equipment financing company that has right of first refusal included. They then have to bring that proposal to their existing partner and get their approval or offer them the option to match it. And that's been tough because we found that there are companies that want to get out of their existing term and relationship with who they're working with, and they feel a little like they've got a gun to their head, and they don't have much optionality. So that, I would say, is something to be very aware of, and making sure that that's not included in the lease and that you have the autonomy to go work with whomever you choose following or whenever you need more equipment in tech. Trying to think if I think of any other clauses to keep an eye out for, I'll mention them. But the second half of your question, Katrina, what was it again? Will you remind me?
If you don't have venture-backed, if you're not a venture-backed company, right? It's totally understandable that it might feel more risky to take that client on, but if they're on the verge of a big win, how do they get that that capital and that support from vendors like you?
Yeah, I think the more runway you have, the better, of course. So, we want to see at least, I'd say 8 to 12 months of runway, knowing that, we don't want to be your final life, like keeping your business alive. We really see ourselves as a complement to other lenders, your banking relationships, your VCs, and we have really strong relationships with those strategic partners as well, and they like us. But making sure, you've got enough cash to continue running your business, and then Two, I think just, you know, understanding the opportunity of each deal, and we look at all aspects too. The founders, what is their experience, and the entire landscape of it all. And like I mentioned, I'm not the credit person, but this is what, you know, I know from my experience. But two, sharing things like, hey, we're raising right now. We've got a lead investor. That stuff, you know, even if it hasn't landed in the bank account yet, that helps us get comfortable and know that there's stuff rolling and happening. And in those situations, sometimes we'll do contingent offers too. So saying you raise X dollars, then we will commit to whatever you're looking for from Camber Road.
There's one company in particular that I'm thinking about that's bootstrapping, and they're funneling all the cash back into their business. So if they don't have a lead investor, but they have, let's say, an LOI or a purchase order, how does that play into the equation? I know that some of the brands here are they're very early, and so the conversation is really about helping them prepare for this in the very near future.
Yeah, LOIs in terms sheets like that, and contracts are another way we certainly can get comfortable, and knowing that you've got customers in the pipeline. So, you know, all major milestones, I always ask, like, if a company's too early for us, I say, keep me in the loop. You know, anytime land a big new account, you get a grant, even angel investors, whatever it may be, keep us in the loop. And so, you know, as the salesperson, especially, I'm always rooting and going to be your advocate to credit and say, you know, they've got things going on and they've secured a couple new customers, or they're coming out with a new product line, whatever it may be. I think those touch points are helpful in building my case, my story, for why we want to get comfortable. And I'll add to you guys to give some more context. I forgot to mention this earlier, but Camber Road, we use all of our own capital. So we're not a broker. We don't sell off our deals. And that is fairly common in the industry, I know. But with that, we have a lot of flexibility with determining who we want to work with. And so all of, you know, that storyline and knowing those major milestones and updates and whatnot really do make a difference. And two, I work hard to try to meet with our potential customers as much as possible. I know the stronger the relationship, the more likely I am to get a pursue from credit. And two, I'd say don't be afraid to start small. I mentioned that we'll start small if there's more to do down the line. But I think being creative in that way and saying, let's establish a payment history page, and, you know, I'll prove to you, like, we'll pay you on time and continue to grow. And we can then quickly increase the funding, even, you know, 1, 2, 3 months into our lease. So it can happen pretty quickly. And I think that's an awesome way to get your foot in the door and start building that relationship. And I always encourage that to some of the younger companies who maybe aren't even in a position to purchase $500,000 worth of equipment, but are buying laptops, or, you know, fixing and putting together an office and things like that, or production facility.
Yeah. And one of the questions in the chat is, how small is small, right? So, you know, kind of going back to one of the examples, you know, this company is looking for a particular piece of equipment that is $50,000. Is that something that you all would be open to? Yeah, we would. Definitely worth exploring. And I told Katrina, but one of my colleagues just closed a deal earlier this week for $70,000. And I think really what got us excited as a company is there are going to be pretty immediate needs in the near future, coming months, where we're hoping that dollar amount will increase pretty rapidly. But if we're excited about a company, we're excited about the founder, we really believe in what they're doing and where they're headed, certainly we'll start smaller and build that relationship. And hopefully that number, you know, can exponentially grow. Yeah. I mean, equipment is not cheap, y'all. I mean, literally one piece of equipment can cost $50,000, $100,000. So these numbers really do add up. And particularly if you're in your own commercial kitchen and you're on the verge of closing a deal, these are these are things that you're going to have to quickly think about. And one of the things that I want us to, make sure that we're carrying through in these fundraising capital extension sort of conversations is that you're selling to everyone. So even Paige here, you're essentially pitching her like she's an investor, because that is, their financing, right? So there's a lot to be ready for, even when you're not there yet. You still want to kind of be ready so that when you're ready, when it's time to move, you can make a move.
And one thing too, I'll add, I forgot to mention this earlier, was with younger companies, I always say, start a running list and keep that on hand. So every time that you buy something or you add something to the CapEx spend, keep a list, because like Katrina said, it adds up quickly. And soon enough, you're going to be like, holy shit, last year we've spent already 150K or whatever it may be. And we offer sale leasebacks. So how that would work would be, you'd come to me and say, hey, Paige, I just spent $100,000 on this piece of equipment. It's brand new or not that old, and we want to explore sale leaseback. And in that case, we would then purchase that equipment from you, and then same as any other lease it back to you, and you pay monthly payments. But that's another option to free up some cash that I think is good to know about. And so keep a list of things that you are spending money on and things that you plan to purchase. And those are good talking points for when we connect too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Madhu?
Hi, Paige. My name is Madhu. We actually own our own manufacturing, and we're in the chai and coffee space. Quick question is, we have picked up here and there, like some used equipment and so forth. And the vision for our company as we build, I think a partnership with someone like you would be very ideal for us. Having said that, even to look at small scale, 100K, well, if there's $100,000 equipment, what would be a typical monthly payment on that? And at what interest rate are we looking at that? Or is it, and since I brought up interest rate, is it, as new companies, we're still in that process of establishing credit. How do you determine credit? Like, is it based on personal credit or company credit and those kind of things? I've gone to the banks in the last couple of years, and due to pandemic, no banks were interested in even talking to us. And they're like, you're less than 2 years old. And so all of these small factors that work against small companies like us, how do you entertain that?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'll say, because we're not a bank, we don't have a rate sheet I can point to. It is very varied by every customer and to what you choose to do with the opportunity, and whether or not you choose to buy it from us, extend, or part ways. I always note, though, Camber Road wants to recoup our costs in that initial term. So if it's $100,000, we want to make around, sometimes it'll be a little less depending on what credit feels comfortable pricing it at. But around that dollar amount, we are looking to retain that in that first schedule. But it truly, without seeing financials, I try to stay away from giving people rates, because it really does vary, and it varies on a number of things, which are what I would ask you for, Madhu, is a due diligence package or financials. And we ask for the bank statements, cap table, monthly historic balance sheet, statement of cash flows, P&L, same with the projections, and list of lenders and description of the equipment. So that's what we ask for typically. And say, I know we discussed LOIs or landing new customers, things like that too. I always encourage people to include when they share that, because those are helpful anecdotes and information to help kind of sell why should we work with you, and why is this a sound investment on our part. And so the more information that you guys can provide to me is always the most helpful. And another reason too, I really want to get to know my prospects and understand them and their business and goals. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and typically, let's say I have a PO from a big retailer, and before we can commit to them, if I come to you and say, hey, I have this in my hand, how
Mhm,
quickly can we get the money? And of course, all
mhm.
the due diligence paperwork, typically, how long does it take?
We can fund immediately. So credit, we're a small team. We've got about 15 of us. There's 9 reps, a couple account managers and the partners.
Got it.
But if we know you're on a time crunch too, we'll turn around. We'll get you an answer in a day. We pride ourselves on no long maybes, because we do it all internally, and so we're able to turn that around fast. And if I do get a pursue and you sign docs, we can fund immediately, which is the same reason why later in the relationship that can be extremely beneficial, because at that point, then depending on where the relationship is at, we may not even need updated financials, and we can just finance or fund right away.
Got it. And at some point, if you can also discuss on how do we build that healthy credit with you, what kind of a disciplines that you like to see from let's say we partnered, that would also be helpful. Yeah, to know.
Just pay us on time. That's
Okay.
really it.
Yeah.
That's it. And two, be a great communicator. That's important to us. And so
Right.
we understand in this, we work with companies that are risky, and there are going to be curveballs, and there's going to be shit that hits the fan and whatever it may be. But I always say, call me, okay? And we'll work it out. We always do.
Yeah.
And we're flexible, and we really want to be an all-weather partner. And with that, we get that there are going to be stormy conditions at times.
Right.
But rather than ignoring my calls or whatever it may be, giving me a proactive call and saying, hey Paige, here's what's going on. Things like that really are important to us.
How many small startup brands do you work with currently?
All of the companies we work with are still considered startups. I'd say our fairway are seed, Series A, Series B companies, and we've got about 100 accounts right now. So it kind of varies, and pre-revenue, post-revenue, we see it all, which
Got
is
it.
to me really fun.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sweeney, you have a question on time frame?
Yeah. Hi, Paige. Exactly. I put in the chat. But just to follow up on the dialogue that's already been happening on terms, can you clarify? You mentioned about payment and your target return of investment, which makes sense. You guys are investing up front, and you need to understand when you're going to get that money back. What is your frame that I think I remember you saying 6 months. Is that your first term or schedule?
No, so depending on the credit profile of the company, or after our credit team has evaluated, they'll determine that. I would say it always falls in that initial schedule between 18 to 36 months. So the riskier the deal, the shorter the term, the less risky, the longer. I would say though 90% of the credit requests that I get returned end up being 24 months to begin the relationship.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from this group?
I actually have a question for you guys, if it's okay. I'm curious. My guess is that some of you guys are working with co-packers. And I'm curious to know, have you guys been finding that you have to bring or buy your own equipment to put in the co-packing facilities? Or what does that dynamic look like? Does anyone here work with co-packers?
I do. This is RP. I haven't been asked to do any of that.
Okay.
Thankfully, I did. I switched to many co-packers. At one point, I did get a group that was like, "Well, we don't have the exact machine. We can rent it, but you'd have to pay the rent, and then we send it back, and then at your next batch, we'd have to redo that again."
Okay.
Which is definitely a lot of money to do. And then some of them, like even the flow wrap machines, like if the sizing doesn't fit, then you have to get one that fits your size. I've had that before, where their machine was making pinholes in my wrappers. So either I was gonna have to lease something and get it to sit there. So that conversation did happen a few times. But nothing, we were able to like find a different wrapper instead of me leasing a whole
Yeah.
machine.
Okay, interesting. I figured that, you know, being earlier that some of you guys might not yet have taken it in-house. And one of my colleagues mentioned that he had a call the other day where they mentioned that, and I hadn't heard that. So I was curious to hear from you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Questions,
if I can
Val?
just,
Yeah,
if
go
I
ahead.
can just say some, thank you. So eventually, I mean, that is like the route I do want to take. I think it's going to be a lot more cost effective if I were to actually bring in, you know, all my work in-house, get a warehouse and all that good stuff. I definitely see the benefit in that. My only fear is like, do you guys also know, on top of obviously leasing the equipment, like, do you guys have resources for those who can be trained on the equipment? Have you ever heard of that before, or is that like a stretch? Like you'd have to kind of get your own person to do that?
My guess is the vendor would have that answer.
Okay.
But no, we don't actually offer that. If they're assuming there's a cost associated with that, though, that is something that could be bundled into our lease agreement.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Of course.
Who here, I'm just curious, who here has, is in a co-packing facility or in a commercial space and making their own? I just kind of want to see the split. I have a general idea, but there's a few that I'm not sure of. And I think that'll also help facilitate the conversations that we're having here and future ones. I know, Madhu, you're in your own commercial facility. Eugene, you're in your own. Shubhra, where are you manufacturing currently?
Oh, I have a third-party manufacturer in California. Yeah. But I would love to sort of, you know, like IRP said, you know, just do it all in one place and just kind of own my equipment. But that may take some time. Yeah.
Yeah. Marilyn, what about you all?
We have manufacturers that do everything.
Cool. Okay. Any other questions for Paige? I know this is a very specific topic, but I've been hearing some needs around it, so I want to make sure that we're addressing it.
I actually have a quick question. Do you have like you said you can really fund any range of types of equipment, even if so basically we would be the sourcer of like finding the equipment that we're looking for, that we want. And then once we find it and figure out how much money that would be, that's when we kind of come to you guys.
Correct. So you spec it. A lot of times we'll even have people just send us the invoice or, you know, give us a general estimate. And then we work directly with your vendors and purchase it from them.
Got it. Okay, cool.
But you're free to put it wherever, and, you know, we'll just address the shipment to the destination that you'd like.
Okay.
Paige, that leaseback situation that you mentioned, how new does the equipment need to be in order for that to be a feasible option?
I would say, I don't know, 3 years old at the oldest. You know, it would be worth looking at. And I know it definitely depends on the equipment itself, right? So I randomly learned that lasers have a super long lifespan where they're like super universal and can be used for years upon years. So in that case, it could be 10, 15 years old. If it's a piece of equipment that has a much shorter lifespan, like a laptop, then we'd want it to be probably nearly brand new.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, there's a few folks here that probably have equipment sitting around that bring in cash would be super helpful at this stage.
Totally. And I always say, you know, no long maybes with us. It's always worth, give me a call and ask, hey, is this anything you would look at? And I should be able to tell you pretty quickly, nope or yep. And, you know, don't be shy or afraid to ask those questions, because I think, you know, we like to think we're really creative and we can come up with different solutions and try to, you know, be a fit for your business.
Well, early stage means we all need to get creative, right?
Exactly.
Dwayne, what about you? You look like you had a question.
Yeah, no, thanks. Good morning, Katrina. Good morning, everybody. So really quickly, speaking of creatively approaching how to raise capital and figure stuff out, is there any sort of like stock that you put into monies that are raised through like a crowdfunding platform, and say you raise $1 million, $1.5 million, and sort of earmark or allocate some of that funding for equipment? Is there any possibility in looking at that and considering that as a creative way to fund some of the equipment and gear?
I want to make sure I'm understanding your question. So are you saying, will we work with companies that have crowdfunded?
Well, yeah. So especially if it's a new widget or new product,
Yep.
and you raise funding, strictly through crowdfunding,
Mm-hmm.
and allocate, a large percentage of that to go toward equipment. Does that mean anything? Do you use that as sort of equity or stock, or how does that even work if that's the only way you can sort of raise money for this specific piece of equipment?
Yeah, and two, we want to look at the company as a whole entity. So if there's been traction elsewhere and you're experimenting with, a new product or service, whatever it may be, then we're happy to explore it, of course. I think we favor institutional funding, but we come across crowdfunding, and in certain circumstances, it can be a really good fit for these businesses and protecting their ownership, as I talked about. And so I'm always interested in looking into it. So yes, I would be curious, Dwayne.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
It is becoming more and more common, CPG companies going the crowdfunding route, because you're able to build an audience quickly. So that's a great question, Dwayne.
Right. Yeah. And brand loyalty, and it's unique and interesting. I can see why people would want to do it.
I have a question. Paige, do you guys also do international? So like, for example, I found a lot of the equipment I need is in China. Before, when I was trying to look for a co-packer, but eventually I have seen it, I have priced it out, but it is in China. So I don't know, do you guys work with international companies?
Yes. Yeah. We've got equipment and tech all over the world. What matters to us is that there's a US entity. So that's the only prerequisite, is we need to know that there is some entity in the US, but we can really place and send equipment wherever.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know we've got about 10 minutes left. Any final questions for Paige before we close out today? Paige, you have any? Oh, Brittany, go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing possibly, hi, Paige.
Hi.
The only thing is, if down the line, if it's quite a ways down the line that we might be bringing in like production facilities in-house or logistics, any of that in-house, what is the best way to start engaging with you now? Or is it just general networking, or?
I'd love to have a call and just get you on my radar. And then, I have my own tracking system for touch points, and after talking, I think we could determine, hey, it's looking like it's going to be 6 months or 9 months or whatever it may be. And then every so often I'll check in and say, hey, Brittany, tell me to go away if you're not ready. But if you are, let's chat and try to stay on top of it that way.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I think it's probably like more a couple years
Yeah,
before we bring
even
anything
so.
in-house. Like things work a lot bit better right now, but that's more so what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I'd love to connect now. I always want to talk earlier rather than later, and understand your business and keep an eye on it. And when you're ready, we're ready.
The worst time to need something is when you need it, right? So like building the relationships. I mean, just like fundraising, you really want to start building relationships 9, 12, 18 months before you even need to raise, because you're really able to tell your story and build trust. And I think those milestones are super important to share. Aswini, you had a question?
Yeah, just kind of lowering the bar even more on cost of equipment, or how small is small. There's numbers that are thrown out there like million plus, and then some numbers around, classic equipment that's 50 or 70. It'd be curious
You're on mute, Sweeney.
There we go. I'm not sure when I cut off, but be curious to talk about, and I think this is probably like offline trying to figure out, my wheels are spinning. So first of all, thanks for just creating this conversation, Katrina and Paige, for kind of looking at the options for what you're suggesting. I'm just wondering how low is kind of silly, possibly, for something that's like a stepping stone equipment that we need or could consider, and starting to like consider the financing. I think a lot of it seems to be like you're mentioning, utilizing a relationship with your company in lieu of diluting equity or using funds from equity. And I think getting a better, clear example of what that relationship is like, and why that's your pitch. Because I'm hearing the conversation that you work with a lot of companies that already have funding. They're already in some sort of an equity relationship. I'm not understanding as much the correlation between the dilution of like that. This is an option to avoid dilution. Is it kind of like don't have to worry as much about going and raising another round for equipment and considering your company as a possibility? Is that what you mean by that?
No, we aren't a substitute to a VC or a traditional raise. Rather, I'd say the easiest way to look at it is after you've given up X% of your company and you've gone through a raise, instead of using those dollars that down, in the long run, if you continue on the trajectory that you anticipate and your company grows into a huge entity, that percentage will be worth a lot more money than what it will cost you to work with Camber Road. So, the argument that we make is rather than taking those dollars and spending them on depreciating assets, hire people, R&D, things that are much more, have a lot more longevity to them, and use those dollars on that stuff rather than buying it all up front, this depreciating asset, and flushing out all your cash to the point where you're running thin or flying too close to the sun, as we say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, got it. And then on depreciating assets, you mentioned a few options for continuing terms. So one of them's renewing, parting ways because the terms are complete, and then buying back. I'm making the assumption that the buyback price would be a depreciated value. Is that correct? And that equipment itself?
Yep. Yeah, so we assess that at the point of purchase, and we use fair market value. And we, that's all things considered. We'd come to an agreement on what feels like, based on the pricing of that piece of equipment in the market, the depreciation, how long it's been used, all things considered, and then come to an agreement on what feels like a fair buyout option.
Got it. Awesome. Thanks for that clarification.
Sweeney kind of touched on a question that Madhu had, which is, I think Sweeney first started the question with how small is too small. And particularly if you see in the next year or so that you might need a bigger piece of equipment, how do they start their relationship with you? So I guess how small? I think that Madhu, you had that question, I believe, right? I think it's in the anticipation of having a growing relationship with you where, I think it sounds like some folks here may want to start a relationship so that they can pivot to a bigger need when they need to.
Yeah.
I think how small is, sorry, Paige. To add to that question, how small is too small? Sometimes we may just need one piece of equipment to scale to a level where, we know that, okay, this is how much business we need to handle right now, and this is a $30,000 piece of equipment, and and then we reach that scale, and by then we've expanded in the market and have more traction, and so it's kind of like those steps of it's 30K now, maybe we'll come back for another 50, and then as we grow, would you have that stepping stone type of a growing opportunity?
Yes, absolutely. We'd want to know your plans and projections and where you see, the next purchases falling to get us comfortable with starting in that. I would say like minimum probably 50,000 would be my guess. Not to say, you know, I would take it to the team and say, is this something that we want to do? But I'd say around 50K, and then know too that there's going to be more to do in the near future. And the sooner that is, probably the smaller we can go to begin. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yeah.
Excuse me.
So we've got 5 minutes left. I have received a couple of pieces of feedback from advisors, and I just want to touch on it here. I would love for everyone to revisit the fellowship onboarding deck as it relates to your advisors. I think that some of the advisors are needing more information from you all. And so if you have not done that with your advisor and really shared your business goals, really dug into how they can support you, gotten more specific, they really need that so that they can help you. And I know that these conversations can be really tough. You know, you're kind of in a vulnerable place, but your advisors are asking questions to better understand and to you know, provide some recommendations. And I know that they are probably asking a lot of questions, which sometimes just, you know, let's face it, sometimes it feels bad when someone's asking you a lot of questions, right? Because we might be feeling a little bit defensive or nervous or not wanting people to kind of see behind the curtain. But these are safe spaces, and these advisors, they've, you know, a lot of them have been in your shoes. A lot of them have supported hundreds of companies that are exactly where you are now. And so the most valuable thing that they can bring you is pattern recognition and helping you recognize those patterns more quickly as well, so that they can provide you those resources. So I just wanted to say that here because I'll be getting some more feedback from your advisors. It's really important to me as well that I get your feedback. So make sure that when I send that form out that you are providing me with as much information as you can. It'll only be Debbie and I that will be reading it, and any feedback that I need to give to any of the advisors, I will be you know, I will basically be sending them collective feedback as well. So this is a longer term relationship with your advisors, and you know, we hope that your advisors also continue to advise you after this program. But yeah, just wanted to say that little spiel, and if we don't have any more final questions, we will see you next week. Thank you
I just
so
want to
much,
add one more
Paige.
thing, you guys. I'm going to add my email in the chat. So if you guys have any questions at all or want to connect further, shoot me an email and we'll get something lined up. And thanks for having
I'll throw
me.
this in Slack also.
Okay, thanks, Katrina.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Have a great day.
Have a good one.
Bye.